I just didn't want two mics to interfere with it. Can you move that one a bit, Julian? Is that all right?
What's that?
The other microphone. Will it not make any difference? Should be all right. We're a little bit early, but we'll make a start anyway. I've got instructions from Julian how to hold the microphone, and it's like this, isn't it? Apparently. But I'd like to just welcome everyone to the Hustings event. My name's Tim Cook, and I run the Harrogate-Informer news website. And I'd like to just thank all the candidates for making the time to come down to the first Hustings event. So what we'll do is we'll have introductions from each of the candidates, and then we've got quite a lot of questions, so we'll try and move sort of quickly through the questions. So could I start with Andrew to give an introduction? So either the lectern or the microphone.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you to Tim for organising this Hustings. Is that better, Arnold? Okay, thank you. Right. My name is Andrew Jones. Quick 1 minute introduction. I'm originally from Ilkley. I went to school in Bradford, University in Leeds, and I've lived in Harrogate for the last 25 years or so. About 200 metres or so from the Odeon Cinema. I spent the first 25 years of my career in business, primarily marketing. Indeed, my last role, commercial role, was a sales and marketing director for Pettison Taylors. That marketing career saw me launch new brands, new products, export programs and new companies. I served for 2 terms on Harrogate Borough Council. That included responsibility for the council's resources, the finance portfolio, and in that time I paid back much of the council's debts. I also created the Environmental Initiatives Fund and had a project to install ground heat pumps into off-grid council houses, and that was a UK first. At the general election in 2010, I became Member of Parliament for this constituency, and my priority ever since then has been this constituency. And I think we have seen great progress: more jobs, more apprenticeships, more investment in our public services, a new Harrogate High School, a new campus for Harrogate College, 2 new operating theatres are being built at the hospital. The old Pacer trains have gone, and new London direct services have arrived. Infrastructure and environmental issues have been at the heart of my activities as Member of Parliament, and I followed that through for 4 years as a Minister. I've only ever sought to represent here. Politics for me is extremely personal. It's about my home area. It is about making my home area even better. Look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you everyone for coming here tonight. I'm honoured beyond words to be a candidate for this wonderful constituency. My name is Conrad Whitcroft. I'm a Labour Party member, proud trade unionist, qualified project manager and a councillor. The reason I'm here is simply because I want to see change. Since 2010, this constituency has joined the rest of the country, facing an increasingly endless and sometimes ludicrous parade of Tory failure in government. Now Harrogate Knaresborough has joined the rest of the country in calling again for change. Real change. That means a plan and a willingness to do what is right. I believe that Keir Starmer's Labour Party has got the right vision to take this country forward, and with me as your Labour candidate, I hope to deliver on the plan for change. Now, I believe that change can happen in places like this, not least because exactly a month and 2 days ago, something very different happened indeed. The Harrogate-born small businessman David Scaife won the mayoralty of York and North Yorkshire and won in places around this county. I know David well, and I think Harrogate and Knaresborough will be well served to have an MP that will work with our new mayor rather than be tempted to take part in party political point scoring against him. As a candidate, I know the value of public service. During the pandemic, I worked in COVID recovery and helped to deliver £9 million of COVID grants to local businesses and residents. And I've also been a trade union rep. And during the cost of living crisis, we've negotiated with our management at my workplace to provide a one-off payment of £1,000 to each of our lower paid employees, which made a real difference to our employees' pay packets. I'm not a Labour candidate just because of my values. I see my values reflected back in the Labour Party. The values of hard work and dedication to public service, of putting your country first and doing the right thing. I believe that Labour has the right plan on hospital waiting lists to bring together an extra 40,000 appointments, on education, recruiting 6,500 new teachers, on cleaning up our rivers, giving Ofwat special new powers. And I would just like to end by saying that I'm going to spend this campaign by talking the Labour Party and my policies up, not talking my opponents down. Goodness knows we've had enough of mudslinging and negative campaigning over the years, so whatever happens, I'm always going to be talking about policies and principles, not personal attacks. I think it's time for a change. I think we can have a fresh start with Labour which delivers on the things that matter here in this constituency, and I know that we can make this happen, so I'm asking for your permission to make it so. Thank you.
I've timed a minute, so I won't say much, but my background is in education. But I've spent my whole life concerned about injustice to people and other animals. Now, there's also a terrifying climate crisis and an extinction crisis. Our own extinction, if we don't wake up. There's so much avoidable pain, misery, and destruction in the world. And that's why I'm doing this very challenging thing. I'd never have thought I'd be a politician, but I've been forced into it by sheer desperation at the appalling effects on people and nature caused by political ideology. Things have just got worse and worse. We used to think things could only get better, but now we know that's not true. Look at some of the things we used to think were inalienable rights, such as the right to peaceful protest. Now we're threatened with arrest at the drop of a hat if it annoys someone. We've seen it coming for decades. Greens stand for pretty much everything these Tories oppose, like a supportive framework of public services. That would be great, wouldn't it? But we'll be coming on to that shortly. If we purport to be civilised, this downward spiralling of nastiness has to stop. And I believe the majority of people out there would agree. So there is hope. Thank you. Thank you, Tim.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Haslam. We've lived here in a building in Harrogate since 2006. We love the area. I have my own business consultancy, which I operate from here. I talk about business change and personal change at that pace in order to deliver projects. I've been a councillor for Bilton and Nid Gorge since 2014, so I think that makes me, having done 2 terms with Harrogate Borough Council and 2 terms with North Yorkshire Council. I'm standing as an independent because this is my home and I want to make it better. I've kept this incredibly brief because I believe you have a lot of questions. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Tom Gordon and I am the candidate for the Liberal Democrats. Over the last 2 years and a bit, we've been working really hard with a fantastic group of local team of councillors, volunteers and activists. I was selected as a candidate in January last year, and since then we've spoken to thousands of people, listening to the issues that matter most to you. I got involved in politics, not out of choice, but because when I was at university studying for my master's degree in public health, my mum was diagnosed with breast cancer. That turned our life upside down, and for me, one of the things that was really hard was seeing that the safety net that we'd always been told was there simply didn't exist anymore. For far too many people, when they're dealing with chronic illness and life-threatening illness, they're left to be by themselves. I got involved because I want to see a change. Our country is meant to be one of the richest in the world, yet when it comes to people in moments of need, there's simply not enough support. That's what motivated me to become political, to get involved, and stand for council, and now standing here as MP for Harrogate Knaresborough. We've been campaigning on a range of issues, whether it be local health services, whether it be trying to make sure there's more support for the cost of living with people, and also to make sure that the sewage is stopped being dumped in the rivers by the water companies. We'll be coming around and knocking on your doors if we've not already. Already I can spot lots of friendly faces that we have spoken to, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of time for questions.
Good evening, everybody. My minute will be a minute. My name's John Swales, Harrogate born and bred. I love Harrogate, I love the area, I love its culture, its values, and I've sensed something's gone wrong in the last few years, and we need to pull the country back into the right direction. I've got a background in corporate activity, I've got an MBA from Leeds Business School, and for the last 10 years I've run my own private business. I believe I've got what we need to get this country back heading in the right direction. Thank you.
Yes.
Is Claire Marshall here by any chance? I'll read out her question then. So, putting your national campaign aside, what is the key thing you want to improve for Harrogate and Knaresborough? And we're going to go randomly sort of through the candidates. Can I put that one to Tom to start with? If it works for you, Tom.
Is this all working? Oh, it is. Fantastic. So the key thing that has come up time and time again, and that has been a plank of our campaign, is local health services. I've been the one leading the campaign to get the money to repair the crumbling concrete at the local district hospital. It's absolutely scandalous that this is something that we're having to campaign for in the first instance anyway. Every patient, every member of staff, every local resident deserves a health service that is funded and able to solve the problems that they face in their time of need. As mentioned, health services is something that's personal to me. It's the NHS is a wonderful institution that's been chronically underfunded by the Conservatives over the last decade now. We have seen endless promise for more doctors, more nurses, more GPs that have failed to materialise. In 2010, the Conservatives promised an extra 6,000 GPs, when in reality, the number of GPs who are currently working in the service is actually fewer than at that start point. So for me, the number one item on that list is the NHS and making sure it's there for when we need it.
I think the key priority for us over the next few years is going to be improving our civic resilience. That means improving our support services including schools and health. It also means improving our environment. The next 5 years are going to be extremely challenging because we've seen global politics deteriorate to such an extent that we're seeing security challenges. So resilience, focused upon our environment, looking after our own areas with strong public services, working together to achieve that. That will be my priority.
Thanks, Tim. To me, I think the starting point for just about everything has to be representation for Harrogate at the council table. We need to have a Harrogate council back, so local people are deciding what happens in the town, not others far away.
Thank you very much. So I believe that the local issues that are most reflected particularly is regarding the water quality around the River Nib. I think that Labour has a plan to deal with that, particularly on beefing up the powers around Ofwat. It's worth noting that Ofwat would block water company bosses' bonuses if they failed to clean up after their mess. In fact, if Labour had been in power over the last Parliament, 6 of the 9 bonuses paid towards water bosses would have been blocked by Ofwat's new powers. Now, for me, the local issues can only be resolved when you have a national government that is willing to do so. As a local councillor, I know that local council services have been severely cut. I'm tired of being a local councillor and not being powerless to help out local people when it comes to housing, to health, to all of the issues that we know are so important. So I think having a strong Labour government nationally, the Labour MP for Harrogate and Knaresborough, will be a really important part in solving all of the local issues that we need to deal with. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I would agree with most of those things. So rather than repeating, I'll bring in housing and also transport. Housing, we're seeing far too much inappropriate housing, not a solar panel in sight, not a swift box or a back box, not enough green space, roofs that couldn't support solar panels, etc., because of, well, hand in glove behaviour between the developers and government, in my view. So they're getting away with lack of regulation, which they shouldn't be getting away with. And transport, of course, we need far better bus services. In West Yorkshire, you can see they've actually brought the buses back into local government control, and that's a fantastic move. It's the sort of thing we should have been doing a long time ago. I've been writing letters to the paper on this endlessly. Yeah, there's... Hello, yeah. Yeah, air quality is a huge issue, and that's obviously really important that we get that right. We've made a few improvements, like the Bond End issue, which Greens campaigned on, and at last North Yorkshire did something about it after decades of messing about. So yeah, with Greens you get commitment. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, some very interesting things there, a lot of which I've been involved with, such as the NID, etc. But what I'd like to start with is the cost of living. I think the cost of living is hurting everybody right now. And the number one thing that bothers me is that there's a north-south divide. And that north-south divide means that at the moment we get about 30% less than the metropolitan areas do for our services. So that means we're getting 30% less services than our equivalent in the urban areas, in the cities and in the south. So that's my first issue. My second issue is that if we're not getting good services, why are our council taxes about 25% more expensive than they are in the south of the country? If we really wanted to pull a quick switch that actually would help people with the cost of living, then that's where I think I'd be definitely going, and that's the doors I'm going to be knocking on. Because without levelling up, without putting more money into people's pockets, they can't do other things. They can't look after the environment. We need people to look after the environment. It's a big issue, but the pressing issue right now is being able to put food on the table, heat or eat. So for me, it's very much about what do we do to sort the cost of living out. There are other issues, transport. If it's public transport, can we make that more affordable? There aren't enough affordable homes in this part of the world, and also making them affordable to run, which goes to Shannon's point. We need to make them so that they're high standard, and instead of costing £3,000 a year in energy to run, they cost less than £1,000. So, cost of living for me, thank you.
I've got one question from Thomas Barrett. Do you want to read it, or do you want me to read it? Tom says, should North Yorkshire Council allow Harrogate Spring Water Danone to extend its bottling plant into the Rotary Wood? And I'm going to Sian to start.
Thank you. Yes, I mean they shouldn't. I've got some leaflets here, in fact. We were down there in Valley Gardens just on Saturday talk about that, and also other issues around nature. We had a nature table and so on. People are very, very rightly concerned about nature, and our local nature, as we've got in the pine woods, the Rotary Wood, planted by school children with the Rotary Club. Those trees should not be moved when they've been planted. And how a huge corporation like Danone has the cheek, has the gall to think that it's okay to do that, I can't understand it, especially when they're doing something like making, well, it's a plastic factory basically. Can Harrogate be proud of producing plastic with a bit of water in it? And of course also, what's happening to the water underneath, or the lack of water underneath that's going into those bottles, I'd like to know. So I'm very concerned about it, and yeah, I'll pass this on to you.
Next. Thank you very much for that question. So I think that this is a range and complex question, particularly when it comes to the issue of planning. It is worth noting that MPs don't get to decide planning laws. I'm a member of a planning committee myself. That decision will be made, of course, by North Yorkshire Council, and I'm sure that they be thorough in their decision. When it comes to things around Greenbelt, we do need to we do also need to understand that there are some areas of the Greenbelt that simply do not match up to being green. There are areas like car parks, disused car parks, former industrial buildings, and things that do make up the Greenbelt. I don't think that we should sacrifice the build more homes that we need for young people in particular. I myself am a member of Generation Rent. I find it really difficult. By the time my father was my age, he'd already bought his first home, and that just doesn't really, that does not feel like a realistic prospect for me when it comes to things like home ownership. Be realistic and understand that planning laws do need to be reformed. So it's a wide point about the Greenbelt, but as I say, MPs do not get the chance to decide planning laws or planning decisions.
Well, I've helped plant trees right across our area, and I want to see more trees planted, and I don't want to see trees removed. So we should be looking at a significant net gain in our environment. That should be the underlying principle when we approach planning decisions. As Conrad just said, we need to be very careful we do not politicise the planning process. If a Member of Parliament wades into a planning process, you actually make it more likely that it will be approved rather than less likely. That was a good bit of advice I got from Phil Willis some time ago, and I've stuck with that ever since. So let's focus on that underlying principle. There is a case to be made that has not yet been fully made, and that is by the applicant. But the principle should be net gain, enhancing nature, preserving our trees.
Thank you. I do apologise because I'm going to give you a straight and simple answer. No, it should not. I played in the Parliament when I was small, and I love the Parliament. We take our dog walking through there. We don't need another factory sticking inside the Parliament. So, no.
I think a lot of what I would have said has already been said. What I look for is, rather than just words, is action. And out of everyone sat here, I'm aware of myself and Shan, who were actually speaking to the Harrogate Spring Water when we were at the Pinelands AGM, when they came to take questions from members of the public. And to me, that's how I would want to be as an MP, someone who deals with actions, not just words. I've been quite critical and quite vocal against the expansion of the site, for a lot of the reasons that people have already mentioned. And whilst an MP can't and shouldn't necessarily try to wade into the planning process, can you all still hear me? Yeah. Right. Perfect. Whilst I shouldn't necessarily wade into the planning process, meeting with the key leaders in those businesses and trying to get the best planning application in the first instance is absolutely what any MP should be doing. Which is why, like I say, I've already been, I've had contact with the Chief Exec of Harrogate Spring Water and got a meeting in the diary with them. And I think that's more key, trying to work with local businesses to offset these problems before they arise in the first instance. But no, in the current application that's currently in, I think it's, as I said, at that public meeting previously, the bare minimum by Harrogate Spring Water to try and offset, and it's greenwashing and not good enough.
Thank you. I have to caveat my answer because I could be on the planning committee. I currently do not sit on the planning committee, however, but I am a councillor in North Yorkshire and also for this area. What I would say is that Danone actually had very clear ESG policy, that's environmental, social and governance policy, that says that they do not want to do any harm or any damage to the environment. So I do struggle with this planning application, and I would therefore say that, again, repeating what other people have said here, is that it's about talking to people, it's about negotiation, it's about coming down with what we believe is the most appropriate answer. We do have planning rules in this country, and we have to follow those, but a lot of the time we have to also engage and make sure that the arguments are fully robust, and at the end of the day we've got to make sure that we get net gain from this, whatever that looks like, even if it's just leaving it as it stands at the moment. Thank you.
Do we have Steve Peston and Anne Luke with us? Steve? Is Anne here as well? I think, do you want to read your question now? Is that?
With many families struggling to make ends meet, increased child poverty and greater inequality, and the ever-growing need for food banks, and with public services cut to the bone, do you agree that now, the prospective candidates agree that now is the time for change? If so, what changes do they and their parties offer?
Well, I think the last few years have been real struggle for families. We've had a series of crises with COVID, which was the biggest economic collapse in 300 years, leading straight into the war in Ukraine, which gave us a giant price increase in energy. So families have definitely been struggling. What we need to do is build up our economy to ensure we have the resilience to help people. What does that actually mean, Steve? That means more jobs, but better jobs too. Our area now has more jobs than it has had previously. Our unemployment rate here is 1.9%. The best way to help people, as you say, put food on the table, is to get them into good jobs. So focus on skills, focus upon having a friendly business environment. I'll just highlight one key area, and that is the national living wage. That has come in and made a material difference. It's been increased to £11.44 per hour this year. And we've seen the number of low-paid jobs in our economy as a whole go down significantly over the past few years. That's measured by the Office for National Stats. Basically, they look at low-paid jobs as those who are earning less than 2/3 of the median income. And under Labour, it was left at 21%. It's now down to 9%. And the reason why is the national living wage, more jobs. So that's how we can improve the situation that we've got in our country. And that's how I will be working were I to be re-elected. Make sure that our economy is strong and that everybody benefits.
Thank you very much for your question. May not surprise anyone that I agree that we do need change in this country, and I firmly believe that you cannot have change if you just keep things the way that they currently are. I think that Labour has a plan to deal particularly with the area around cost of living and the problems that we are facing in this society, but I'm very proud of the pledges that we've made, particularly around energy. Now, Great British Energy is going to be an energy company that will be set up by the incoming Labour government, which I hope will be elected, to make sure that we have clean energy, saving on average about £300 per month for household bills. So I'm very proud that the Labour Party is pushing that forward on renewables and on nuclear as well. I also believe that housing has been a serious issue that we need to see change in. I've mentioned before when we've spoken a bit about planning law here. Now, I cannot make planning decisions if I were lucky enough to become your MP, but I know that planning law is completely broken. I keep having to explain to my friends in Generation Rent, why can you not afford a house when your dad did it so quickly or your mum did it so quickly? And the simple fact is, we have not built enough homes in this country. Labour's plan to build 1.5 million homes by the end of this parliament, half of them affordable, is going to make such a positive difference to bringing down the cost of living, whether it's to buy and getting people off that the doom loop of renting as well. And also on transport, we can make a real difference locally. Now, as I've mentioned, David Skate, a friend of mine, is now the Mayor of York and North Yorkshire. I didn't believe I'd ever be able to say that, but there we are. This is the kind of time of change we live in, and this is how Labour have proven that they can win in constituencies all across North Yorkshire. He wants to set up a municipal bus company. I think a lot of people are sick and tired of being ripped off by public transport, and that's why I'm proud of Labour's plan to renationalise the railways as well, and to make sure that that brings down our bills for travel. All in all, I think that Labour has the most positive, joined up and comprehensive plan for change. And I think that having an MP from the Labour Party to represent Harrogate and Knaresborough would be an absolute boon for the town. It would be the first time for the constituents, it would be the first time in history that this has happened. But I think this upcoming general election will be pretty historic, and I'm looking forward to making history here as well.
There's lots of ways to improve this, and thank you for the question. Of course we need a lot of change. But the first thing is, well, how do you fund it? The Green Party has been looking at this very carefully for a long time, and taxation is hugely unfair, grossly unfair. There are many changes that can be made to the taxation system, which would then fund public services, better public services, so that people get what they need from the public services. The other thing is landlordism. I don't agree with my colleague here that we need to build lots more houses. There are too many rented properties which should be on the market. Landlords are supported inappropriately. There should be support for both renters and landlords. Of course, there should be, the Green Party is very much about proper and fair regulation of pretty much everything. But if it was fairer, there wouldn't be so many people wanting to own property to rent out, and you would therefore have those properties available to buy. So that's another thing. Public transport should be subsidised, so that shouldn't cost people as much. As has been said by others, we need better transport which is publicly owned and subsidised to get people out of their cars. Also, active travel, obviously we need to encourage walking and cycling where people can do that, but I'm talking about the mass sort of transport here. And I think oh yes, of course, energy insulation. If our houses were not costing us as much to heat, if we were properly insulated, if measures were taken, which that was supported by government, put into place by local government, then that cost an awful lot less for families. So there's a lot of measures that can be taken. We definitely need the political commitment for that change.
Thank you for the question. I believe it was about feeding children that you were really interested in. So the first thing I would be looking at is, as I mentioned, for me, the cost of living is the biggest crisis we have right now, and we have to start to fix that very quickly. And so the first thing is, I go back to the point is that there's some quick fixes that if the government got on and sorted fair funding formulas out so that we actually have more money for services up in our councils, then that would be a great start. One of the things that really annoys me is that if you rank all the different councils across the country in terms of the spend per pupil in school, we are 143rd worst, I guess, so if you see what I mean. So I am concerned about the level of spend from central government. The other side of it is, and I agree with Andrew to a certain extent here, is we have to continue to build an economy, a thriving economy in which everybody can work and earn to their needs. But one of the challenges I see around here is that we don't really have all top quality jobs. We have jobs that get us to a certain level, but too many of our young people actually have to head south to get a decent job or a long-term career. And one of the things we've got to do is not just sort of have good jobs, but we have to create a hierarchy of better jobs so that we have managing directors here for many, many companies. And so I would see that side also has to be built so that we give an opportunity for people to stay here. And then, as I say, there's all the other stuff about affordable homes, etc. But I'll just leave it at those 2 points. Thank you.
So I think one of the key things that we as a party have talked about already in this election campaign is we announced our policy to make sure that every child, no matter their background, no matter where they live, will get at least a free school meal, one hot meal a day. And to some people, that's guaranteed. They're always going to get that. But for far too many children out there, it wasn't. We know that having food and access to it for kids is vital to our educational attainment, and we've seen a massive spike in recent years of people using food banks. And it's not just people who aren't in work, it's in work poverty too, and that's really hidden. There are lots of people who are in well-paid jobs who are still struggling, and the cost of living is really pinching at them. And a real key doorstep conversation that I had actually was last October with a lady in Knaresborough, and she was a single parent. My mum was a single parent, so it runs quite true when she was speaking to me about it and hit home. And effectively she was saying that in March this year her mortgage was up to be renewed, and she was looking at an extra £200, £300 per month in interest payments, and she didn't know where she was going to get it from. She couldn't take on extra hours at work because then the childcare would cost more than she'd be bringing home, and it was going to leave her in a really tough, difficult position. What she had to do was have a conversation with her daughter about stopping her daughter having gymnastic lessons. And to me, that really highlighted the loss of opportunity that this cost of living crisis is taking, not just from all of us, but the next generation and the generation underneath that too. And we need to do far, far better. And I think that's a little bit what Paul's talking about in terms of regional disparities and inequalities. We know that whilst we, broadly speaking, are a relatively affluent place in Yorkshire compared to other places, there's still massive pockets of deprivation and people who are really struggling. So it's something that any of this area should never be complacent about. And like I say, there'll be more policies from us on what we do to support tackling things like hunger. But that one, like I say, is a real standout, and we're the only party at the moment who's said and committed to making sure that children have food in their tummies when they go to school.
That's a very good question, and I believe in keeping things simple if we can, rather than going off on a long rant about all the things I do for everybody under the sun. But looking at your personal balance sheet, basically, to get more money to spend on the things that are important to you, we need to reduce your cost of living and let you keep more of what you've got. So the response to that from reform is reducing energy bills by removing the subsidies from people's bills, removing the VAT from bills, raising the personal income tax level to £20,000 a year per person. That gives you more money to do with as you please, rather than to be taken away and distributed to causes that you may or may not agree with. Thank you.
Is Jenny Child here?
Yeah.
Which can I? Where was it?
Okay, I'm going to suggest that people are sick to death of all the nastiness and the mudslinging and the banana milkshakes and all that lot. What are you going to do to persuade your constituents that it's worth voting? They're sick to death of broken promises, broken Britain, and self-serving politicians who just fight each other like rats in a sack. All sides, we've seen quite a lot of that recently. What are you going to do to persuade the people who are not here tonight to get out and vote on July the 4th and to really engage with this process?
A very powerful question. As an independent, that's why I'm standing as an independent, because the world has got fed up with politicians and parties, and it's a sad fact that we are now fighting instead of working together. So that's why I'm standing as an independent. I'm reaching out there to try and so that people move out of this tribal situation. Somebody looks from a green perspective, oh, I can't change that because but it might be a perfectly good idea. I don't think any of us here have the exclusivity on any ideas, and I'm sure that at the end of this process, just as at the end of the combined mayoral authority process, we all came away with brand new ideas. To compete was actually means to actually strive together and to actually learn more, and I think that's what we need to be doing. We need to be learning from the different things that everybody has here. In particular, we've had some great ideas from this side and this side, and if we just work together and we look to the things that bind us rather than divide us, then we will get on better. And that's why I'm fighting to be independent, your independent MP, because I believe that I can pull together the parties. One of the things that really bothers me is what I see as a disconnect. There seems to be a disconnect between the MP role, the councillor role, and this situation we have no town council here. And I think that's wrong. And I don't think we have enough democracy, I don't think engagement, consultation is to be, this is how we're going to do it. But it should co-creation, we should be building things together. We should be building things together, in my opinion. And if we did build things together, then we carry them out together. And that's the critical issue for me. And if we carry on the way we're going, we're not going to get anywhere. And so for me, independent MP will deliver for you and start to deliver change. And here in Harrogate, we can actually set a trend across the country. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll just leave that. Okay, we're good. So why is it worth people going out and voting? Why should people be bothered to engage? Well, democracy and representation isn't a one-day event. It isn't just election day. It should be a 24/7, all year round engagement and activity. And that's certainly how I've seen my role as a candidate. I think everyone here, I was probably announced my candidacy probably longest ago now, last January. And since then, I've been out 5 nights a week, knocking on doors, speaking to people, picking up those concerns, highlighting them and campaigning where we can to deliver change now, before I'm elected, hopefully, if we choose. I think there's a real nastiness which has been touched upon, but I think that's rooted in the way in which our current political system is set up. And that's one of the reasons that I joined the Liberal Democrats, is because I believe in fairness, and our voting system is utterly broken. It is not fair, and it shoehorns people into these two parties that don't represent the views of everyone. And if we want to see a fairer society, that starts by seeing a fairer voting system, where when everyone goes out, their vote counts and they get a representative that they put their vote for.
Hello? Oh, good. Well, I never thought I'd say it, but I agree with Tom. PR is the answer. I completely get where you're coming from, and I understand your feelings, because I have the same ones too. We've got to get PR, because you can get 20%, for reform, we get 60% of the vote, we won't have one MP. They get 16% of the vote, they'll have 50 MPs. There's something wrong. And the only way we're going to we're supposed to live in a democracy. Demos means government of the people, by the people. We don't live in a democracy. The last 15 or 20 years, something has gone very, very badly wrong in our system. I won't get into why, but I think we all feel it. And the only way that we're going to change that is by change. And change doesn't happen with the same two parties going ping pong every 5 years or 3 years. We've got to change the way. Collaboration may well be the answer. We had the Lib Dems and the Conservatives in power for 5 years, and you know what? They moderated each other's behaviour, and they did very well, actually. So I think PR is the answer to your question and my feelings as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, obviously PR, the Greens have been trying to get this for a very long time. It would be wonderful, because we've had one fantastic Green MP who's won most of the awards that are there for MPs for being the best in all kinds of ways. Sadly she's leaving Parliament she's now left. But we're hoping we'll get perhaps quite a few in this time. We'll watch this space. But yes, campaigning out on the streets for issues which matter to people, and that's what we do. We have we have 800 councillors across the country. People don't realise this. The Greens are in councils all across the country in large numbers and make a huge difference. And doing that sort of thing at the local level is very, very important, and will eventually, we hope, translate into national level when we get a proportional system, because we know that most people are green and they want to vote with their heart instead of voting tactically. So yes, we get out there on the streets, all of that matters, people talk to us, we listen, and we can make a difference locally. I've left my notes there and I've forgotten what else I was going to say, but there's a lot to say on that. But, thank you. Thanks. And there really is a difference, a big difference between the Greens and other parties. So when people say you're all the same, for us it's very, very frustrating, because we know that we are very, very different. And you know, we're looking at a fundamental difference in how we live our lives. not just fiddling at the edges, but really reviewing what is happening and what is needed in this hugely different world from what it was not so long ago. You know, climate crisis, biodiversity loss, these are not fiddling around the edge type of things. These are things we have to really, really think about. And none of the other parties are doing that.
Should we give it a go? Hey, there we are. I know a fair bit about trying to get on in politics when you're from a different perspective. I learned this from a young age. My mum is in fact a Conservative. Yeah, exactly. She's nowhere near as disappointed in me as my dad, who was in militant. So I know about the need to respect one another. Only time they ever argued was about politics. They're still together and very much in love, as far as I'm aware. And I know that there is just what will bring people's faith back in politics is delivering, but empty promises will not. So that is why I think that the Labour Party has got the right steps here for those 6 pledges that we laid out. We're not promising the earth, and we're not saying we'll be able to change things tomorrow. That's where this all has started, with a sort of a populist approach that says it'll be jam tomorrow and jam today as well. I don't think that that is the right way to go. I think that having a clear list of priorities that's been set out by the Labour Party to point out what we can change, what is within our grasp to do. And Keir Starmer talks about a decade of national renewal, and that word renewal is just as important of change, to think about we can have a fresh start and something better in the next few years. We're not going to stand here and promise the earth, and we're not going to say that changing one part of the electoral system will make everything suddenly better. But we do believe in having a government that is capable of delivering on important and big changes that will be able to positively impact your lives. GB Energy in particular is important for me. I do believe we need to build more houses as well, and stop the rent doom loop from happening, and also making sure that we deliver on transport and more devolution as well. You know, people like their local mayors a lot. It's very rare that the local mayor will lose re-election, but then people aren't so happy with their government, clearly. Bringing it down to that local level and making sure that we've got power fairly distributed across the country as well has to be part of that. So that's where the constitutional reform would be where I would start. But just being nice to each other. It's not hard, and I think we can all find it much, much easier and get along and have proper discussions if that's something that we all commit to doing.
I think you ask a very important and very powerful question, because I think our society, not just in the United Kingdom but around the world, is much nastier, and I think there are a number of factors that are shaping that. I think one of those is that people can feel empowered by social media to say all sorts of things. I've certainly been on the receiving end of it, and I understand that people in politics will always receive some grief. I would just gently say to the Liberal Democrats, you've been very good at dishing it out. I would also perhaps just suggest that women in politics get significantly greater abuse, black women especially so. Diane Abbott has received more abuse than anybody, and she's a proper pioneer who deserves some respect for it. So what do we do about it? Well, I think that what we have to do is make sure we reject the politicians who are succeeding at the moment, because they're around the world. You look at who is succeeding, it's people who are making other people angry. Trump is perhaps an obvious example there. That is not how I think we will create better societies. I think we will create a better society by showing that the democratic system works for everybody. If PR was the answer, we wouldn't be seeing nastiness in countries that have got PR, but we do see that same nastiness. So PR isn't the answer to the question that you asked. I think it's down to leadership and working together, and I think it's down to people holding their politicians to account. Let me give you an example of what I think is good civil leadership. After the October attack from Gaza and Israel, at a moment of extremely high emotions, and it's a very, very upsetting conflict. The brutality there is deeply upsetting. But I worked to bring people together here. The leader of the Harrogate Hebrew congregation, the leader of the Harrogate Knaresborough Islamic congregation, and Christian faith leader too. We put out a joint statement emphasising our common humanity. That, I think, is an example of what I think should be good, positive civil leadership, and that is where I think I have tried to be. I always keep everything very positive, and that's what I would do were I to be re-elected. But this is a complex societal question, and I think it is up to all of us to take a pace forward and look at what we do to make the situation better.
And I'll just come to Malcolm. I'll go list now at the back.
The York and North Yorkshire Climate Change Plan, the route map to carbon negative, calls for a 900% increase in kilometres cycled, 40% increase in kilometres walked, and a 48% decrease in private car use by 2030. Over the past 10 years, the local highways authority has done virtually nothing to achieve these aims. Quite the contrary. What will the candidates commit to do, if anything, to try to achieve these very challenging objectives?
You've got me. Our policies in terms of the environment revolve around moving to clean energy, nuclear fusion in the second half of this century, renewables at the moment. But if we have renewables, we will have to have gas, because when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, there's no energy. So we have to accept that as a transition fuel to getting nuclear fusion. As to your specifics of your question, then I think it's down to local demand, lobbying local government to get these schemes in place, because if they are popular with people, then they should be built. Thank you.
Well, Malcolm, this is something that we've discussed many times over many years, and I entirely support the principle of more cycle routes in our area. There are very few things that are good for you and good for the environment, and cycling is certainly one of those. I do not think that we have made the progress that we should have made. You heard me tell you that several times before. I think the Oxley Road cycle path, which should have been a positive, actually turned out to be a bit of a negative, because I think it was so badly executed it's put the case backwards rather than moved it forwards. The principle of encouraging it, I think, is about increased, better segregated facilities. That will improve safety for cycling. As regards walking, well, I think we should just be encouraging it. I participated in walk to school events, encouraging people early so they get into the habit of walking and stay in the habit of walking. So capture people's imaginations early, but clearly cycling and walking, very positive indeed. Sustainable transport, clearly part of our future.
So there are 6 million people now on waiting lists for hospital operations. So if we want to see people being able to use active travel measures, then the first thing we can do is try to make sure they're fit and able to do so. I think that's step one. There are lots of people out there who'd like to, but for whatever reasons, it's taking ages to get mobility aids or those operations that they need to be able to go about and live their lives. One of my big frustrations is that we have not seen a proper integrated transport plan for our towns and for our area. That's a failure of both the previous council at both levels, whether it was HBC and the county, and also now the new North Yorkshire. What we need is all local organisations to come together and figure out how we get people moving, whether it be by bike, whether it be by foot, whether it be by car for those who need to. I'm cautiously optimistic that with new powers that have been devolved down, that might see some money and some investment in schemes that would help people get around by means of bike and other schemes. I think the problem that we've got is that the approach that government has taken in the last sort of parliament or two is this piecemeal approach to funding, and little pots here, little pots there, and all the time and effort that goes into bidding for these pots ends up costing more than what local authorities then sometimes end up with. We need a proper bold approach where government will give to local authorities and empower them to build the infrastructure where people want it. And I think, you've only got to look at Station Gateway as an absolute disaster on how to do consultations. Pretty much everyone is fed up and unhappy with what's coming out the other end of the sausage machine. And I think that's because there's been this absolute approach of ramming things through without listening to people and not doing the groundwork to make sure that there's a scheme that can, accommodate everyone and their accessibility needs. And I think for me, that's what we need to see from an MP, somebody who's going to get stuck in and be leading those conversations, joining up those different community groups, organisations, local authorities and transport partnerships, and making sure we have a system that works as a whole.
Malcolm, you're absolutely spot on. We have not delivered enough active travel in this area, and that plan is very ambitious. But there's a major problem behind this plan. There's actually no substance, there's no monitoring, there's no measuring, and therefore if you don't monitor and measure, you can't possibly know how much more cycling we're actually doing or how many less cars are on the road. So the very first thing we've got to do is put in place a plan that says by 2026 this many journeys or this much cycleway has been produced. And that's the whole thing that lacks any cohesion at the moment for me. Now, I'm also on the council, but as an MP, I would be looking to use the powers to convene, to bring all the parties together and say, look, we have a problem here. Or for those of you, I watched Apollo 13 the other day, and they tried to get the filters. There's two sorts of filters, and they have different shapes, and it was how they teamed up to work out how to put these two shapes together. And we've got to get the right people in the room and say, look, here's the objective, how are we going to do it? And we've got to do it in a timely fashion. So I fully agree with you. We've got to get this active travel thing sorted. We're also wasting a lot of money by starting processes and not finishing them, and we really need to think it through. So I 100% agree with you, but I think the key is monitoring and measuring, and from an MP's perspective, that's about convening and bringing the parties together, such as the new town council when we get one, the county council, well not the county council, but the council, and also the area constituency committee, which is the local representation of the council. Thank you.
Yeah, Malcolm, it's a big one, this one, and a lot of it comes down to a sort of attitude issue, doesn't it? North York, when I had kids over here and I wasn't over here, I was trying to get around in North Yorkshire. I spent a lot of time trying to find out where the buses went. I could get a train from somewhere and a bus to somewhere else, and they were kind of, I get the answer, well, everybody's got a car in North Yorkshire. It was that kind of attitude. It's a big attitudinal thing we have to overcome. Even going to, you notice it, going to various meetings and things, people don't immediately think about, well, shall we share cars? That everyone just goes in their own cars, which is, to me is quite a big thing. I use the bus, I came here on the bus just now, I use the buses all the time, and as I've said, I'm always moaning on about the lack of bus shelters, the lack of seating. If you're out there in the rain, you're often standing there under nothing. You don't get the information, they don't come when they're supposed to come. Now, buses are the sort of thing that could be organised using the information technology that we have these days. We have the technology to make it much, much better out there in the rural areas where people are so lacking in buses. That it's not rocket science, and that could be done, and that's the sort of thing North Yorkshire should be getting its head around and getting funding for as well from central government. Another thing in terms of trying to get more bikes going on rural roads, it's very difficult. We have quite dangerous roads, and that's the thing that stops a lot of us cycling on roadways. And I know, Malcolm, you're doing a lot of work with the extended cycle path up through Ripley and so on, which is fantastic. We love that cycleway that goes from Knaresborough through to Ripley, and hopefully it'll be going onwards. And we should have more of that. We should also have, the thing I'm passionate about is footpaths. The Ramblers Association is doing a fantastic job at trying to open up or to look after footpaths that are already there. We need new ones, let alone looking after the old ones. We need to be working with everybody to get these going so that people can easily walk between settlements. Like I live in Knaresborough, between Knaresborough and, say, Stockton. At the moment, to get to Scotland, I'd have to walk along quite a few roads. So I'm sure there used to be a path through there, and there'll be a lot of those around. So that's something we can really look at. Local authorities used to have footpath officers. Do they now? Do they? Yes. Good. That's good. I'm not particularly aware of any, but yeah, certainly it's the sort of thing that's been cut, along with a lot of other things with local authorities. That's a major problem about all the things we're talking about. Local authorities have been starved of cash, and you know, when it comes to nature things, the officers in charge, there aren't enough of them. They haven't got the time to do many of the things that they would like to do. Some consultation has been mentioned. It's often not good enough at all. And I mean, I've been helping Zero Carbon Harrogate with 1 or 2 walk to school days. There's things like that can be done. But a lot of these things need funding, and they need local authorities to be able to get behind them, and that needs political will from Westminster. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, fantastic question. Thank you very much, Malcolm. Particularly when it comes to the goal of what environmental policy should be, we want to be able to reduce climate emissions and reach our net zero targets. Now, that cannot just be done by transport alone. I believe transport accounts for about 1/3 of emissions when it comes to that. So that does have to be a focus. But there is also another option to be able to build further into renewables and also into nuclear as well. I think that Labour is the only party that is putting forward a sensible option for that, which is Great British Energy. Now that will, as I've said, cut household bills, but it will also be able to provide much cheaper, cleaner energy, so that we're no longer, in the grip of when we saw the war in Ukraine and realised how much gas that we import from Russia and other regimes like that. We would no longer be in the grip of that. We'd have homegrown energy, offshore wind and things like that. I think that would provide a really important and much more effective dealing with the environment alongside the transport. But your question was very much about the transport area there. Potholes, I don't think anyone's going to contradict me, is the thing that comes up on the doorstep most, that we need to deal with the most. Now, our Labour Controlled Combined Authority Mayor David Scape has already set aside a large portion of his funding to contribute towards potholes. And potholes are not just a motorist issue. I say this to people who I don't have a car. I can cycle and I get the bus or get the train. I'm not being sanctimonious, I just can't afford one. But I also think that it is important for us to be able to say, if we are going to deal with potholes, it's for cyclists as well, and it's making sure that people who are using active travel feel comfortable on the roadways and the pathways. Yeah, absolutely, very supportive of making sure that we have walk to school, more walkable communities. Part of that has to come from having close by amenities as well, making sure that people feel like there is a shop, an affordable shop that they can walk to, not something that they're going to be priced out of, or not a local surgery that they're not going to be able to get on the list of relating to that. So a lot of this comes from the new powers. Now, I'm a massively passionate person about buses. I think buses are absolutely fantastic, and I know that not everyone shares my view. But my view is that if you were able to provide more bus routes, then it would become easier to drive. I know people just need to drive. We've worked excessively hard in York to make sure that people who are disabled feel like they're able to park closer to the city centre than people who don't have disabilities. So that has been a key focus as well. But fundamentally, it's going to come down to not just Westminster, but what happens at the Mayor's office as well. And this is, I hope, what has run like a thread of rock through a stick of rock, what I've been trying to say is that having someone that can work with David Skates, having someone that can work with the large amount of funding that has come through from the mayoralty for active travel, millions of pounds allocated as a regular payment, I think that's going to be a really big boon for this constituency. And on dealing with active travel, I'm massively in favour of it. We just need to make sure we get the delivery right. Thank you.
I've got a question submitted from Pat Sower. This week my son Don would be 24 years old. He committed suicide at the age of 17. Why 7 years after Don died, are young people being left vulnerable without specialist and timely support when they're suicidal in Harrogate and throughout North Yorkshire?
First of all, I'm sorry for your loss. It's a terrible thing, and unfortunately there is a real problem with mental health, whatever's causing it, and that was actually pre-COVID. I know COVID has caused a lot of challenges, but we have to do much more to help with mental health, and we have to get more specialists involved, because at the moment we have a situation where often the police, who are not skilled in this, are having to attend these sort of situations. Recently, without giving any confidences away, I know of a young man who's been arrested twice in the last few weeks as a result of his mental health and in sort of making threats on social media. And him being arrested doesn't do anybody any good. So, and in fact, as I say, he's now back, fortunately he's back in safe care, but he was released after 2 weeks because we didn't have enough space, and now he's gone back out, and then he's been re-offended, and he's now back in. So we have to find a way to fund this. We have to find a way to prevent these things rather than try to treat the symptom. So I very much would be looking to how we can use our resources better by perhaps combining the police, the local authorities, the new mayor, and pulling everything together. Because one of the things that is for sure is the two main parties have said they're not going to raise taxes. So if we're not going to raise any more money, then we've got to think of smarter, better ways of doing things. And the only way I see of us doing that, and it comes back to what a lady said earlier, is we have to work together. We can't have this nastiness and we know the right way. No, we know the right way. We've got to work together and work this out, because we're getting casualties, and those casualties don't deserve to be casualties. So I would say we have to really truly invest by working together to look after these people.
I think I'm really sorry for the loss, and I think this is one of the things that certainly has come to the attention of people in more recent years, just the amount of people who are actually dying by suicide. I actually, a few months ago, met with a chap called Steve who lost his son when he was at university, and he committed suicide then. And he set up a charity in his son's name, Jordan Legacy, and I've been working with them, and I've committed with them to help however I can. And it's one of those things that touches a lot of people. I think my background is in health services research, so my first degree, I'm originally a scientist, and then did a Masters in Public Health, was at the University of York as a health services researcher. And we know that if we intervene early and we try to prevent people, then it obviously can be really effective. It's quite a difficult topic to sort of touch on, because there's nothing that we'll do to fix it for families who have lost loved ones. What we can do is try to make sure it never happens again to anyone else. I think we've got to be bold in trying to make sure that we stamp out people who die by suicide across the board and try to stop that from being the case where anyone has to feel that and deal with that reality. And part of that, and one of the long-standing commitments of the Liberal Democrats, and one of the things that I'm really proud of, is that we've consistently, over decades, called for parity between mental and physical health. And that is something that still, even though there's lots of talk and words and everything, we don't see. Waiting lists are up across the board. When I was at university, I'm not ashamed to say that I ended up resitting the second year of my degree because I had a mental health crisis. And I got fantastic support through that university at that time, but that was only available to me because I was a university student. If I had needed to go see an NHS doctor, then I'd have been waiting well over a year. And that's simply not good enough. When people are in crisis and need help, it's important they get the support that they need at that time. More money is needed, obviously. It's always easy to say more money is needed. But what we have seen is cuts in grants to those frontline services at a local authority level. Public health prevention grants have been decimated. by the government in recent years, and making sure we've got those early opportunities to intervene and stop more losses of life is what's going to make a difference.
Yes, I'm sorry, Griddles too. I think mental health issues are perhaps the pinnacle of the iceberg when events like that happen, but underneath that there's this hidden world of people suffering varying degrees of mental illness, and some of that is to blame on the pressures of modern life on people and the expectations that are put on them by the media and various other communication organisations. And I don't have the answer, but I know that more funding must be made available, and we must have in place counselling schemes for people who can go to them, and also remove the stigma that seems to be attached to mental illness, where, you know, if you fall and break your leg, you're poorly, if you're mentally ill, you're going to sit in a corner for a few hours. I think we need to destigmatise it and provide funding for it. This is useful.
When Dom died, I very shortly after that met with Pat. I know the family very slightly, and it is a truly tragic case, and it has had a profound impact. I undertook to work with Pat, Dom's mum, to highlight the challenges, particularly for younger men, because we see suicide amongst younger men as quite a problem area across our country. There are many things that we can do. I would suggest that the first is very much a cultural one. And we have passed a law on parity of esteem between mental and physical health. Passing laws doesn't necessarily affect cultural change. We need to actually recognise that we need to do more as a society to make it okay to talk about mental health. To stop it escalating, where you actually need to have emergency interventions. But if you do need to have that, then obviously the emergency interventions needs to be there. We have a 24/7 free phone number run by the Mental Health Trust, which does provide emergency contact. We've seen extra funding allocated to mental health, so specifically £4.6 billion in the last 6 years. So we're seeing extra renewals, but the challenge is very profound. And when we have such a tragic case, as Dom's case was, it's just absolutely awful for the family and the friends, and it has a profoundly cascading effect on all of them forever. So I think it is about everybody working together to change that cultural sense, making sure the facilities are there if necessary, but try to stop escalating in the first place.
Thank you, Pat, for asking that question. I'm sure Dom will be so proud of his mum for bringing such an important issue to light. I am 24 as well. I will be 25 the Friday before the election happens. Quarter of a century is a very long time, but it will take another quarter of a century or the thing most likely to kill me stops being me. The issue around suicide for men, young men in particular, is one that's affected me personally. I've lost 3 very close friends, including one family member to this over the course of COVID. I agree that there have been a lot of solutions offered, but sometimes it just feels like words fail. The tragedy the issues in the tragedy can start very young, and that's why I hope we will be able to implement Labour's plan to put mental health nurses in every single school, or practitioners in every single school, to make sure that we look after young people properly. Mental health practitioners in every single school to make sure that we look after our young people properly. This has been an issue where I've got a record on. I've introduced 2 motions to the City of York Council on mental health in the past year, particularly around making York a trauma-informed city. It's important to understand the impact that personal trauma and the psychological experiences we have in our life can shape perhaps the conditions we have and the manner of leaving them. Agree that the parity of esteem is very important, as is the cultural change. My family have been fantastic with me, always encouraging me to talk about my feelings, and I try and do so specifically with my male friends. We also need to remember this is not a male exclusive issue. In fact, young women are far more likely to attempt to take their own lives. They just tend to use less permanent methods, not to put too fine points on it. More positively, in the motions that I passed to City York Council, they were both unanimous. People from all political parties got on board with this. I've not heard anyone here tonight say that mental health is not an important issue or not something we need to deal with. I hope in the next government parties, members of all parties will be able to contribute towards an effective solution on mental health. It starts, as I say, young, making sure we have mental health practitioners in every single school, but also making sure that we are able to strengthen the cultural change and talk openly about it. I raised some money for York Mind recently. I ran 5k, which for me is a massive achievement, and managed to raise some money with the rest of the Labour group in York. I think that really helped me personally, being able to say that I tried my best to do something for the friends that I've lost. But I know that much bigger change is needed, and I hope that all of our parties, regardless of colour or none, will strive to make an effort. Thank you.
Yes, I'm really sorry to hear about your son. And I think I worked for a time in York Council doing special educational needs. And so much of this service provision to support people when there are various problems, so many different problems, it all needs money. And that all comes back to political will, taxation, arrangements, attitudes towards taxation. There's been a shameful neglect of the services for mental health. And as other people have said, of course we need counsellors in schools, far more, lots of them. And I think young people now have got far more stresses and strains than perhaps most of us did. The mobile phone issue has been pointed out recently as, after some research, as being a major cause of young people's mental ill health. It worries me a lot with my grandchildren, and I think the huge stresses that people are under for many of the things we've been talking about tonight, struggling families, money, heating and paying your house, having a decent job, all these things add up, don't they, and weigh on people. Lots of it comes back to taxation and partnership between the agencies, different agencies, the local authority, the health services. I think that's really important, as others have mentioned, the partnership, the good communication. I also think that it must be, as a young person today, how do you cope with a kind of lack of future? It won't have passed them by that the climate is closing, the world is closing in on us because of the actions of human beings on this planet. We actually don't know how long we've got left, or not how long we've got left living a reasonably civilised or decent life. Now, children and young people may not talk about it very much, but they can't. They're not stupid. They won't have passed them by. With my own grandchildren, it's a big thing for me, but I don't mention it very much with them because I'm too worried about the effect on them. But they will know about it. It's probably one of those things they know about and I know about, and we don't talk about it because it's too frightening. So we have to deal with the climate issue. That is a huge issue for young people. Feelings of hopelessness, and also, the fact we haven't got the services in place, but the police are getting involved inappropriately, because proper services are not available. You end up with police vans arriving at people's houses because there isn't. Things have got to a crisis point. That shouldn't be happening. So yes, shameful neglect. Thank you.
Is Tim Farley here? Tim's asking, if elected, how would each candidate tackle the endemic problem of drugs and the associated antisocial behaviour that is polluting Harrogate?
Shall I start with
Thanks very much, Tim. Yes, antisocial behaviour has become a serious problem all across the country, particularly related to constituencies and towns in particular, I find, but also within cities. I'll just come to the drugs moment in a moment, if I may, but also related to antisocial behaviour itself, that which is, whatever the field will be, we simply need to have more police officers on the streets who are capable of dealing with it, particularly when it comes to community support officers. As a ward councillor, I've had the honour of being able to work with community support officers who can't arrest people but work in a very effective way as sort of a coordinator of the different services that are available. Now, those services, as I'm sure has been mentioned, have been significantly cut, council budgets have been slashed, and councils are often at the front line of dealing with these antisocial behaviours. We need to have more respect and understanding for local government and making sure that we fund them properly. Also, providing more police on the street will help with people often feeling unsafe to even leave and open their doors. We've also seen recently that the police have been instructed to stop arresting people because there's not enough places in the prisons for them. I don't think that that's the sign of the 5th richest country in the world, or one of the richest countries in the world. I think we ought to deal with that. And that needs to be dealt with. Also, when it comes to addiction, the drugs that cause it, we need to make sure that we have the proper funding within the NHS. That means clearing the backlog. Labour's national plan to do that with 40,000 more appointments by cracking down on non-doms to fund it. Yeah, I think that antisocial behaviour is a bit of a serious problem, because I think sometimes some people feel like it's not. Some people feel like it might not really be a crime and might not be worth reporting if you see it in your street. You might think, oh, they're causing a problem there, but should I bother the police with it? Will the police even turn up or do anything? A lot of people will worry the police are so over-resourced they can do very little other than just hand out reference numbers for insurance claims. So we need to make sure that we have more of them. We need to make sure that we have a proper funding system in place. And we also need to make sure that local authorities are respected and listened to when it comes to them, because they are very much on the front line.
Do you want to talk on the mic? Do you want to bring it through?
Well, the first thing we should recognise is that antisocial behaviour has a really very serious impact upon communities. It can sometimes be seen as trivial, but it really, really is not trivial. It can take different forms in different areas, but the key thing is to nip it in the bud before it escalates into anything more criminal. And that has been an initiative which is a little bit of a joint initiative, but it's been led by the police. We've seen some policing hotspots trial work, and that has been successful, and that is going to be expanded right across the country. So the key thing with antisocial behaviour, get in there early. Drugs. Well, this is a very significant challenge because governments from around the world have been trying to deal with the drugs crisis for a significant number of decades, and they haven't been winning. Some have declared some kind of surrender by effectively legalising. I do not think that is a very good idea. I have seen people's lives ruined by drugs. I do not think this is a very positive thing at all. The question, I think, is about tackling the distribution of drugs, and that has been quite a positive piece of work done tackling what is called county lines gangs. I've been out on patrol with the local drug squad in Harrogate, and they were very good. They knew exactly what was going on, and indeed an arrest on the day, somebody who had actually come across from West Yorkshire, out from Bradford, dealing heroin on our streets. So, not taking any kind of tolerant approach to drugs, but making absolutely sure that we have got the appropriate substantive addiction facilities so we help people off them. So slightly different questions, drugs and antisocial behaviour, but there is a very clear overlap between them as well, and a very good question to ask.
comes back to lack of sensible taxation, lack of public funding to the services. Youth services used to be working with young people all the time, and now there's hardly anything left of youth services. What do we expect if we cut all these services? Activities for young people are generally very few and far between. Very few places for them to gather and just talk to each other. If they're too young to go into pubs, they can't go there. Where do they go? If you think about where you live, are there many places young people are allowed to go? Everybody's spending their time saying, oh no, we don't want them there, they might make a mess, or they might be noisy or something. And so, you know, I think we need to think carefully about how we regard young people and how much support we give them, just in ordinary little things. Nature used to be, to me, I know, as a young person, I really found nature therapeutic. There's not a lot of it around. Now I'm saying all this because I think drugs and alcohol are a sort of escape from feelings of hopelessness, feelings of, you know, boredom and so on. And I think those things are the things we should be tackling. Yeah, thank you.
Drugs and antisocial behaviour, we get quite a lot of it where I'm a counsellor. One of the things that we've been doing is we've been working with the police quite effectively, and also the residents have been working really well as well. We've used helplines, we've used the various lines of anonymous calling, so that the police get what I call local intelligence. Now, they can't always act on it every time, but we've got a system whereby we pass on details of perhaps meetings and various things. I hear tales of the fact that, you know, residents know that the police are about to do a raid because they see the merchandise, we'll call it, moving from apartment to apartment across various places. So there is a way, and I'm finding it very powerful the way I'm working with the police and where my residents are working with the police. But what I would say to everybody here is that you need to report. Now, we've got this situation, the technical term is learned helplessness, where we don't think that the police are going to do anything, so we don't do anything about it. But I've got to tell you, every time you put a call into the police, or you put it on 101, or you put it on their website, it logs something there. A few years ago, I was involved with a public house wanting a late licence. All the neighbours were up in arms, and they said, well, whenever this happens, the cars are damaged, somebody urinates in my doorway, the cars are scratched, etc., etc. As part of that consultation, I spoke to the police, and they said they've had nothing reported for 10 years. So, you know, that would have easily blocked that licence application. So, it's about, you know, you helping us help you. So the more you report, the more demand for police, the more we will get it through. So antisocial behaviour, again, it's another thing. Report. And no, you might not get a response immediately, but you will end up with an answer in the end. I've seen a number of motorbikes which have been going through the wrong place, and eventually the police catch them, and it ends up in some form of device that renders it no use anymore. But I would like to pick up on another point, which is I believe there's not enough youth service provision, and we need to look at youth service provision and how we give the youth things to do. Now we need to ask them what they want to do in the first place, and I think it starts with this engagement, this consultation. What do you want the space for? How can we help you get that space? So I think there's a series of things, but if we're not careful, this turns into harassment and bullying and various other inequalities that we don't want to see in our society. So it's a very serious problem that we have to deal with very harshly in the short term, but I think we need to be looking at the causes and how we treat the causes rather than treating the actual symptom that we see. Thank you.
I'd like to start by just saying I agree in large part with what Paul's just said. I think for me, I always look at things about how we can get to the best solution, and it's about using that evidence and that built-up knowledge that we've accumulated over decades to get the best outcome, and be a bit scientific about it. And I think what frustrates me is it's very easy for everyone to stand here and promise that we're going to, lock them up, throw away the key for people who've committed a crime, whether it be taking drugs, whether it be antisocial behaviour. The reality is, if we were to do that, people who are jailed for things like that then re-offend at a higher rate for more serious crimes. The absolute priority should be trying to prevent and then also rehabilitate. No one is beyond saving. I'm not religious, but it does sound a bit Christian, doesn't it? It's about giving people that opportunity to do the appropriate punishment and then move on. And I think there's a massive issue in that the funding for those services to rehabilitate and integrate people for people who might be drug users or have committed serious crimes have been cut. And that's the harsh reality if we want to get a solution to these problems. And that again comes back to decades of underfunding and cuts to those schemes through local authorities and the police too. Thousands of PCSOs have been cut in the last decade, and that's now what we're seeing on our streets. It doesn't happen overnight, but day by day, week by week, graffiti here, noise complaint there, and it builds up, and that's what we're all seeing now. On the drug side of things too, if you look at other countries around the world where they've tackled it as a public health emergency rather than a criminal one, they have a lot better outcomes in trying to make sure that people stop using drugs, but also if they do it, because that's going to happen. Some people are going to use drugs, we can't stop that, but making sure they do it in a safe manner and they don't hurt other people. And that's really important if we actually want a solution that's going to have an impact. And I think, what frustrates me whenever we talk about drugs is it's always something that's used to punch down at working class people. We never talk about white-collar drug use. When you see in the news that every toilet in Parliament is littered in cocaine or whatever, and all these sort of stories, it's about time. If we're going to be hard on drugs, then why don't the Tory MPs start with themselves?
Hello? Yes, antisocial behaviour. Oh, sorry, yeah, sorry. Yeah, so antisocial behaviour and drug use, they do overlap. I think Tom makes a good point in that we think of drug use, we have a stereotypical picture in our heads, but I have knowledge of people in Harrogate who wouldn't fit that model. I'll separate them out. Antisocial behaviour, I think it does come down to funding, and it comes down to the old-fashioned thing, Bobby's on the beats. If we have police in the community knowledge, interfacing with the local people, we will clamp down on a lot of this antisocial behaviour. Dealing with the drug situation, I think it's a very, very complicated problem, but you can break it down into two sides, supply and demand. So the first thing to look at is the supply, and this is down to policing, border control and intelligence. Where is it coming from, and how is it getting into the country? The country's awash with drugs. They're getting in somewhere, so we've got to stop getting in. And secondly, demand. Why is there such a demand? I haven't got all the answers, I'm just trying to ask the questions. If there's such a demand, why is there such a demand? What is missing in people's lives that they feel they have to go there for a solution? So again, it comes back to mental health issues really, and counselling and awareness of the problems people have got and trying to provide solutions for them without them finding self-medication in the various drugs that are available. Thank you.
I think we've run out of time now for more questions, so I think we just need to really sort of thank the speakers, but also give them an opportunity for a final statement, if that's okay. Andrew, would you like to go first? Should we use the lectern? Two to 3 minutes, if that's all right.
Well, I think we've had a very wide-ranging and very positive set of conversations this evening. tackling a broad range of issues. So thank you very much for the opportunity, Tim, for creating this event and for everybody coming along. I think the next 5 years are going to be incredibly challenging for the world. And we're not going to be in any way immune to that. I'm thinking particularly about security pressures, which I think will be the greatest for at least a generation. We're seeing expansionist, aggressive despots working to destabilise countries, invade neighbours, and we must work with our friends and neighbours to form alliances to be strong in support of our values. So I feel that the world of geopolitics and defence priority will be absolutely critical. But I also see huge amounts of opportunities for the next 5 years. New industries, things like AI and life sciences, green industries. So I see the challenges being both security and opportunity. When I look at the teams who might be leading this, it will be either a Sunak, Cameron, Hunt team or a Starmer, Rayner, Lamy team. Well, I find that choice remarkably clear. I think it's a choice between experience and decisiveness, or a team perhaps whose record on defence particularly is mixed at best. But we are also choosing a local champion for us here in Harrogate and Knaresborough. Now I am committed to and have delivered for our area, and that has seen investment in services, and our area is better for them in schools, in hospitals, on the trains or the buses. And when I look at the challenges ahead here, I see environmental issues being very central. We need to help people with decarbonisation. Not a question of whether you decarbonise, it's a question of helping people with how to decarbonise. We need to build on the success of the bathing water bid to see a plan to improve water catchment right across the entire mid-valley. Building on the success of the increased capacity of the NHS and the RAC issue has actually been completely resolved, and the NHS has now got its funding. That work is underway to both demolish the existing therapy suite and build 2 new operating theatres and a new day case ward, which will deliver much more capacity within our hospital. But the question is then making sure that we catch up on all of the problems and the COVID backlog that we've been experiencing. As several colleagues here on the table said, we need more homes, but I'm concerned about our green belt. We've all seen the opinion polls. The opinion polls suggest that Mr. Starmer will be our next Prime Minister, and he has said that we will be having building on our green belt. Well, I do not want that. I want to see our green belt protected. So I see risk for our area from a Labour government. Over the past few years, we've seen 3 supposedly once-in-a-century events just 12 years apart. It's the 2008 financial crash, followed by COVID, followed by Ukraine. It has been a very, very challenging period.
2 worst prime ministers in the history of the country.
We've seen world-scale events, 3
And then we had the worst foreign secretary, Johnson.
once-in-a-century events, and they've been just 12 years apart. So we have seen a long, hard slog for all of the world. I don't think there's any coincidence in that Putin invaded Ukraine directly after COVID, when Western countries were exhausted and their balance sheets under real pressure. But despite that, we have seen significant progress in this country. 4 million more people are in work, including 2 million more disabled people in work. We've seen this country be the first major economy to cut its carbon emissions by 50%. We've seen us go from declining educational standards to be best in West for reading. We've seen deaths from cancer fall by 10%. We could go on, but what I'm going to really point out here is that we need a champion to fight for our area, fight for us locally, and help us nationally stand up for what we believe in. I've been doing that as your Member of Parliament, and if I'm fortunate enough to secure the trust of the local people again, that is what I pledge to do.
very much. I'd like to thank everyone who asked a question and came along tonight. Democracy happens because people are willing to come to events like this and listen to people like us out in front of you, and that's what democracy is all about. So thank you very much. Thank you, Tim, for putting up with us and organising this event. I think you need your own round of applause at some point today, sir. Maybe at the end. So, of course, I am aware that there is a rumour going around that I'm a paper candidate. In fact, I've been told I'm a paper candidate so many times I can actually hear myself rustle. But that was before, a month and 2 days ago, something very remarkable happened indeed. It didn't just happen here, but it happened in Selby, it happened in York, it happened in Scarborough, it happened in Whitby, it happened in the county where the Prime Minister has his own constituency. The Harrogate-born David Scaife won this mayoralty, won this county for Labour. Don't let anyone ever tell you that Labour can't win in places like this ever again. Not one single vote has been cast for the general election. I think postal votes are dropping in the next couple of weeks. Don't let anyone ever tell you that there is no chance that Labour can win here. I think Labour has got the best policies, and I think that it is clear from the polling, and keep my fingers crossed, touching wood and everything, but I think that Keir Starmer will be the next Prime Minister. I think we will have a Labour government. What is better for the town than to have an MP who is a member of that government, sat on the government benches, able to make that influence, able to make those arguments? There is no point choosing an opposition MP who won't be able to do anything other than shout from the sidelines. I was sick of shouting from the sidelines when I was an activist, so I decided to get on the pitch and score some goals of my own. That's what I'm going to plan on doing. I think that Labour is the party of public service. I think the mood has changed rapidly. Yes, COVID was a once-in-a-lifetime event. I don't think that the self-inflicted wounds of Liz Truss and her disastrous economic policy helped one bit. But I think that we know now as a country that the world has changed, that time has moved on since 2019, and we can see that we value those that we used to value least in society. Now, as we saw through COVID, are the ones that are crucial to keep us going, the hard-working people of this country. I cut my teeth during the COVID crisis and learned about public service then, and I'm committed to taking those values forward now. So I really hope that you will cast your vote for Labour, just as so many people are going to do for the first time at the general elections. So many people did for the first time at the mayoralty. I'll work with David Scaife. I'll make sure that we have the right policies and the right investment for us, build the homes we need, turn on Great British Energy, and get Britain's future back. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Tim. Really good that part of democracy is having these kind of events, so fantastic that Tim's organised this. There are lots of maxims I could use. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance. That could be a Green Party motto. Things won't improve if you just shut your eyes and ears and hope for the best, whatever that is in your book. Regulation, or red tape, as it's called by those who don't want to be bothered by it, is crucial in a world where there are so many of us humans busy with our machines, technology, buildings, vehicles, chemicals, and selected and modified animals. We're all jostling for rights and space and fairness. Without regulation, we're seeing grotesque inequality. This is resulting in disease and early deaths of people and destruction of nature. The hostile environment invented by the Conservatives to try to keep migrants away is like a snarling dog which has got out of control and has now turned its snarling attention on everyone. People who are disabled or homeless, out of work, have mental health problems, need support, people who are young, old, work in the public sector, drive trains, you name it. If there's something wrong, it's not the government to blame, but anyone else. Anyone at all, except the very rich, of course. I hope that people at this election are going to think very carefully about what actually matters to us humans. It's not about fiddling around the edges now. This is serious. This is worse than a war, in the sense, well, it is a war. We're at war with ourselves, and we've got to think very carefully about how we organise ourselves from now on. The growth paradigm, the idea that you can have infinite growth on a finite planet, is a little bit last year. Worthwhile jobs, what is a worthwhile job? Worth thinking about that. Greens have been standing in protests with NHS staff whose conditions and pay is pathetic, and with the RMT regarding getting rid of everybody, all the staff apart from the driver. I mean, how crazy is that? They tried to do that. I'm not quite sure where that's got actually, but it's absolutely mad. I mean, if somebody's ill or there's a fight or whatever, you need somebody else on the train. All these things. The River Nid, full of sewage, and I'm sorry, but the bathing water status doesn't cut much ice with me. I think it's nothing. I mean, it's the Environment Agency who are denuded anyway. There's hardly any of them. They don't get much money. How are they going to do much? They'll test it occasionally, and it'll probably say poor, poor, or very poor. So where have we got to with that? Rivers and the sea as well, waters need public care. They should not be cash cows putting money out to shareholders, which is what's happening at the moment. And with so many of our public services, we are being, I don't know how, we are being so trusting and so polite about the way we are having our family silver sold off under our noses, often to shareholders, often foreign governments. Absolutely crackers, if not totally tragic. Regarding cancer rates being better, I've just heard that cancer in young people is up. And I'm not surprised, because we're all swimming in not just in the river, but in a pollution, in our food, in our air, our water, in all sorts of stuff that we bring into our homes because regulation is so poor. Power corrupts. Let's not let the power go to be in one place. It should be shared. Failing to plan, I'm going through some maxims here. Failing to plan is planning to fail. And that's what's happening. We're not planning. There is no vision going on at the moment. And regarding the defence issue, I would rather have jaw than war. And I think a country which spends its time looking at how we can make more money from selling weapons to unethical, murderous governments, we should be ashamed of ourselves. We need to think again. Coming back to nature, I've put a few leaflets out at the back there. There's one on Protect Nature, that's a Green Party one, about what we want to do about nature, and a Green Party 10-point climate plan. Those are out at the back with some other RSPB and other wildlife leaflets for anybody who'd like to take them. Thanks again to Tim. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Tim. Where do you begin? Or, in this case, where do we end? So, I want to tell you about an event that's happening this October. My family are going to celebrate the arrival of our first great-grandchild. And so it got me thinking about the future, and there are a number of things about the future, particularly Shannon has alluded to. And one of the things that I think you need to know is that by 2034, it is likely that our rainfall will be longer duration, rivers will burst their banks more frequently, and the west of the country, those pesky Lancashires where I come from originally, will get even wetter. We're likely to have more severe weather, and we need to do something about this. We had a dozen storms this last winter, causing destruction to roads and infrastructure and flooding for long periods of time. Our farmers are going to struggle this year to produce our food. But we also have more pressing challenges: the cost of living, homes, the NHS. And so how will it be in 10 years' time? What are we going to do about this? Well, I think we need a new unifying vision to bring people together to resolve all our issues. I'm standing because I want to see more fairness. Fairness is a British trait, but we don't seem to be being very fair on each other at the moment. I mentioned the inequalities of the north and south, but there's inequalities with whether it's colour or gender or ability or versus disabled, and we need to start to work on all these things. For me, there is a disconnect between local and national government, and I struggle to understand the lack of cooperation and coordination between local and national governments, local councillors, the MPs, and the new mayor. As I mentioned earlier, we've pledged no tax the main parties have pledged no tax rises, so we've got to find a different way of doing things. As your MP, I will be a central figure to pull things together because I believe in local first. Being an MP isn't just about shaping national policy, it's about understanding the local impact, and we must consider what is best for people of Harrogate and Knaresborough. I will put everything through a lens of local scrutiny as well as climate change. We need speed and urgency though. We need competence, governance and a better question. And as a better question, I want to give you an example of, for years, I've been told that in planning meetings that the drainage will cope with the new housing. But actually the question was wrong, because what the company actually said was true, because it was illegal. It is legal to spill sewage. The better question would have been, how much more is the chance of sewage spilling into the public domain? And that would have changed the answer to a lot of planning permissions, I believe. We need to be less tribal. Politics has become so tribal, but there is no exclusivity on good ideas. We've heard lots today. But Prime Minister's Question Time sets a poor example. We teach our children not to bully or harass, yet they witness this unproductive, unseemly display on TV every week. Effective government comes from strong, credible, constructive opposition. As an independent, I can cross boundaries unaccompanied by party shackles. I seek to serve, and to quote Albert Einstein, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. To bring about change, we must think differently. Think independently. Thank you.
Just like to start by saying thank you to everyone who's come here tonight, including all the other candidates. I think back to the very first time that I came to Harrogate. I'm originally from 30 minutes down the A1 away, and it was really exciting. It was a school trip to Great Yorkshire Show. I'm sure everyone here has been or put their kids on a similar school trip there. And I can remember driving through thinking, wow, this is a lot nicer than the mining town I grew up in. And effectively for me, it was always something of aspiration. Harrogate was where people moved to when they made it, when they had something to show, and when things were good. And I'm so proud to, for the best part of 2 years now, to have called and made Harrogate my home. And I know that we can have it so much better than things currently are. I'm an underdog. Every single day of my life I've had to fight. My mum was a single parent when she had me. I was eligible for 3 school meals and went to a pretty rubbish state school. It was no givens in life for me, and I was the first person in the family to go to university. I never thought I'd have the opportunity to stand somewhere like here with the potential prospect of being, a candidate to the MP for Harrogate and Knaresborough. And I'm incredibly proud no matter what happens. I think as a person I'm ambitious and bold, and I think I've tried to demonstrate that over the last 2 years as the candidate for the Liberal Democrats. We've been out endlessly pounding the pavements. I know you're all already sick of pieces of paper through your letterbox, but a little bit more. And just really telling you what I'm about, what I stand for, and why we need a Liberal Democrat MP here again. I think one of the points that was made earlier by one of the other candidates was that opposition MPs can't do anything. Well, we know here that's simply not true. Every door that I go around, people still look fondly back upon when we had a Liberal Democrat MP in Phil Willis. So don't let it be said that opposition MPs can't achieve things. This election is going to be one which is going to be fraught. It's going to be hostile, and I don't think it's going to be particularly pleasant. And I think that's a culmination of all the reasons and questions you've raised tonight. When you look around, things are broken. The NHS broken, the railways broken. Not to be too doom and gloom, but it's a little bit rubbish at the moment. The Liberal Democrats have a plan. We want a fair deal. We want to fix the health service. We want to ban the water companies dumping sewage in rivers. For years and years, we've had a Conservative Party who've had 100% of the control, taking voters for granted and lurching from crisis to crisis, whilst changing Prime Minister every few days. The problems that we're facing have been avoided, and we've been let down by that chaos. Don't let it be said that Liz Truss was funny or harmless. She wasn't. People are still paying that price in increased mortgage payments now. The reality is, here in Harrogate and Knaresborough, that, as I think someone else mentioned earlier, we've all seen the polls. We have. Lots of polls have it very close. There was one just yesterday that had the Liberal Democrats 1 point ahead of the Conservatives. We won't be taking anything for granted. We won't be taking you for granted. And we will fight tooth and nail to make sure we get every single vote and can deliver that fairer society and that vision for our towns. The reality is that come that morning after the general election, people are either going to be waking up thinking, great, this is amazing, people will have a smile on their faces, or will be faced with another 5 years of the failure we've already seen and know too well. The problem that we've got is that we've been told endlessly that we can have Sunak, who's going to scare you into voting Conservatives by talking about the rise of China and Russia. They're serious problems and they should be dealt with seriously, but we shouldn't elect a government out of fear. And the problem we've got on the other side of the coin is Keir Starmer. Amazingly, people don't have much to say about him. The reality is it's not about who's in government, it's about who is going to bang the drum and fight for our towns. And that's exactly what I would do if I had the pleasure of being your MP.
Like they say in a job interview, you should always be first or last. So I'm last. I think, and I'm going to keep it short and sweet because we've run over. I'd like to thank Tim, I'd like to thank everybody who's asked a question, and I'd like to thank all of you for coming here tonight and sitting and listening to us. You must have the patience of saints. Short and sweet. So for the first time in a long time now, you actually have a choice. We've had a two-party state, a uni-party I call it, because really there's no difference between the two of them running us for the past 20 or so years. Well, there isn't. Have you looked at the policies? You've got a chance to vote for change now. I'm not going to go through all of our policies, they're all in here. If anybody wants to look at them over the first course of a 5-year government, they're fully costed. I would recommend you have a look at them, and I believe now is the time for change in the country, and if you vote for reform, you will get it. If you don't, we'll carry on as we are. Thank you.
I think we've come to the end of this evening then, just to thank everyone for coming along, and thanks to all the candidates for answering all the questions. The questions that we didn't get to, because I know there were some that have been submitted on the night, I'll try and get written answers to those questions and get those out to you. But no, thank you for everyone for coming along. Thank you.
Technically, we might it seemed to work all right. Seems so easy. Yeah. So it's gone.